life adventure has a name. It must be
He-Man, the most powerful man in the universe. Game over, man. Game over.
Your move, creep.
What are you looking at, butthead?
I sent him into the future.
What happened, Hopstone?
You see that? Yes, I thought I did it.
I can't believe I did like this, geek.
All right.
What's up?
You the talk or you hurt?
You're listening to TV Ate My Dinner. This is episode 7. My name is Sean, and I'm sitting here with Greg and Brooks.
Hi.
Hey. We're going to talk about movies from the 1980s and television shows and whatever. We're going to talk about all things 80s except for the music because we don't have enough time to dedicate to that.
Yeah, that's a mini-series.
That's not even a whole other episode. That'd be a whole other show besides ours.
Yeah, I was like, well, I don't really even think we're qualified to do that show. Because all I listened to back in the 80s were movie soundtracks anyway.
Well, that's all they made in the 80s as far as music. Like, everything was a soundtrack.
So not true. But I'm the music guy in the group. So I kind of get shunted out on most of these episodes because I don't know TV or movies. But if we ever do a music episode...
Bid at coolness all of a sudden this far into the show.
I got the soundtrack to Dragnet. That's how curious I was about that.
Awesome. What was that? That was the one that he did that Tom Hanks and Dan Aykroyd did together.
City of Crime, man.
City of Crime. It's the City of Crime. That was awesome. That was 80s music, Brooks. You being the music guy, you should be fully versed in City of Crime.
I've decided I want to get the Bloodsport soundtrack. That was on the other night, and the song at the very end of that. If it's not on the soundtrack, I don't want it. But that song is awesome. It's the perfect 80s. It's like, we're going to rise to the top. We're going to defeat our enemies. You know, just like perfect.
That's the Karate Kid thing. Like, you're the best around.
Yeah,
no one's ever going to keep you down.
It's completely the stuff South Park guys are always making fun of.
The 80s sold us on this idea that if you just played a really cheesy, like, rock anthem, you could learn how to do anything.
And it has to be motivational.
You know, at Dragon Con a couple of weeks ago, we missed a perfect opportunity to meet the master of the movie anthem, Frank Stallone.
We did miss Frank Stallone. That's, Frank Stallone did Peace in My Life, Remember the Call. That was this, like, really cheesy song at the end of the Rambo Part 2.
Rambo had some good ones too, man.
Rambo was awesome. I don't even know who did the version of He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother.
That was, what's his name? Bill Medley from the Righteous Brothers.
See, that's awesome.
He ain't heavy.
But yeah, we did miss out on Frank Stallone while we were at Dragon Con.
I guess,
quote unquote, promoting our show.
I guess we should briefly do we were at Dragon Con, which was over Labor Day, and we had fun. Hopefully, we put out a lot of postcards with the show on it, so if any of you guys picked that up and found us that way, we're extremely grateful.
Well, you found us through Dragon Con, yeah. That was not our point in going there, but it certainly was something we wanted to do. Was pick up new listeners. And
we're super excited to have you if you're a new listener, and we hope you stick around.
Absolutely.
And Greg and I got a chance to see Buck Rogers and Wilma Deering in a panel.
Oh, okay. I saw them, but not in a panel.
Oh, yeah. I almost ran over Buck by accident, but it's crowded, so,
Well, good thing you didn't, because he'd have done one of those karate chops on you that he's always doing in the show.
He could have done a judo move on me or something and shown me his junk through a satin pants. Got to be careful of that in Buck Rogers when they have him strung up from the ceiling and the jumpsuit rides up. Ooh.
Maybe she'd have gone
horrifying.
You'd said, Tweaky, quick! And then some kind of blast would have hit you from behind. Yeah. Did you see Hawk? Was Hawk like floating around behind him? Looking weird with his bird head?
Yeah, they weren't big on Hawk. The Searcher episodes took quite a hit in the Buck Rogers panel. But yeah, Aaron Gray was there with Gil Gerard, who spent a lot of time talking about his gastric bypass. and looks really good for him.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
But I was excited to see him. I got to say that was the highlight of the convention for me. I'm not like a convention guy anymore because I never understand what people are supposed to be. But when they do Buck Rogers, I get it. That's the old school nerd in me. I'm like, yeah, I love Buck Rogers. There's like a stadium full of people waiting for a Harry Potter panel. I'm like, not me, man. I'm walking right in so I can talk to Buck Rogers and Wilma Deering. I have a Dragon Con rule that serves me well, which is if there's a line really long, I don't do it. No matter what. Like one year, everybody from the Serenity movie was there in a panel. Like Nathan Fillion and Adam Baldwin, like all the big people were there, and the line was around the block. And I'm like, nah. And I would have liked to have seen that, but I got to draw a line somewhere, you know? Buck Rogers, you walk right in. And I'd rather, like, watching Buck Rogers open my eyes, I, like, realized I had a catharsis watching, like, Gil Gerard and Aaron Gray and Felix Silla, who was, like, the guy who was in the Tweaky suit. He didn't do the voice. Mel Blanc did the voice of Tweaky.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. Like, if you watch the episodes, you'll know it because he sounds like he sounds like Bugs Bunny, or he kind of sounds like Yosemite Sam when he talks.
Yeah. What's up, Doc? Doesn't he say something like that? Does he say what's up, Doc? He says something like that.
He says, hey, Buck, beady, 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 beady. What a great line to have created. I wish I created some kind of icon that just went around saying nonsense. But I realize that's my kind of science fiction. You know, we were talking about this the other day about how science fiction is too gritty.
Yeah.
And I realized that in its campy cheesiness, Buck Rogers exemplifies everything I love about science fiction.
And, you know, it was a good show, though, I think.
It's highly,
for what it was.
highly entertaining.
The first season was really good.
I'll tell you another thing I picked up at Dragon Con that I'm pretty sure was an official DVD release, and as far as I can tell. It had an illustrated cover and stickers on the CDs, so I think this is real. But Battlestar Galactica 1980, which is what I love about this, is as cheesy as Battlestar Galactica was in moments, they still, like, they're not embarrassed by it. Even though it pretty much was one of the classic, like, 79 to 1980 sort of sci-fi show. But Galactica 1980, they sort of just pretended it never happened. So it's never gotten, like, a DVD set or anything. I mean, until now, where I bought it. Of course, there's one now. I bought it.
Well, it's completely legal. Someone was selling it. They wouldn't sell it if it wasn't legal.
But, like, tables and tables of these things. Of course, I'm sure.
Had to be on the up and up.
And I also got Space Giants, the DVD, so that's pretty cool. If you know what that is, I don't.
Oh yeah, Space Giants is good.
That's 70s, though, right?
I don't know. Probably early 80s. I guess. I'd say.
When I was a little kid, Space Giants used to play in the afternoons on TBS, and that's how I saw it. And so, if you meet people that are just a little younger than us, they have no idea what Space Giants is. People of our generation, the pre-cable generation, you remember that coming on.
I vaguely remember
when you got home from school.
I'm on the cusp, I guess, of that generational gap because. A lot of the stuff you guys talk about, I don't remember.
You don't remember Goldar and Gam?
I'm all of 1 year younger than you. That's what's sad. Apparently that year is a pivotal year.
Well, Space Giants was every little boy's dream because it's like about this little kid that...
Is that the one where the robots change into rockets?
Yeah.
Okay, then I do
Goldar,
remember that.
Gam.
I get it mixed up with all those other Japanese shows.
Oh, it's awesome though. Especially, I don't know what the original dialogue was like, but the English dub dialogue is amazing. In its badness. It's so awesome. And it's so weird because as I'm watching it, sometimes they just didn't bother to overdub it. Sometimes whole episodes are just still in Japanese.
Yikes.
Like, I guess like Space Giants archives aren't completely comprehensive.
Well, there might be episodes that never aired in the States.
Well, it could be. But it's weird because it's a serial, so it's even weirder if you think they just skipped an episode because they basically go like episode for episode. In the show.
I don't remember as a kid.
I don't know how we weren't completely lost as kids.
Or anything. I just remember.
Well, it's all stupid because it's all about Rodak is sending different like monsters to do awful things to the Earth, and Goldar has to fight them. That's like every episode.
That's Voltron too. That's every Japanese project from that period, isn't it?
I think Space Giants is like the progenitor of all that kind of stuff. The Transformers, Voltron, all of that, like Power Rangers, all that. Like came from Space Giants, I think.
Or came from TV shows like Space Giants. I mean, probably...
Well, yeah, Space Giants wasn't the only show like that. You got Spectre Man and Ultraman and all that kind of stuff. They were all the same genre. And for some reason, I never watched Ultraman and all that. Space Giants is the one that stands out to me. I think it's because it used to come on at like 3 o'clock. And even if I got home that early from school, which I usually didn't, I was fixated with the soap opera Santa Barbara. I used to watch that.
We learn more and more about Sean every week.
Yeah, really. We're peeling the layers every week. I'm not scared. I'm not the resident music
This is
guy.
what happened. So when I was a kid, I was obsessed with Star Blazers. I thought that show was the coolest of all shows.
That wasn't a bad
I loved
show.
the ship.
Yeah.
I loved everything. You know, you're familiar with Star Blazers, right?
Yeah. Oh, I remember Star
watched
Blazers.
it in college. I got a VHS of it and watched it, and I couldn't stand 5 minutes of it. It was so bad. And this is why I fear I don't want to watch anything I loved as a kid because I'm just sure 90% of it is awful. I think we remember things a lot better than they are. And you got to remember, you're like 6 years old watching this, so of course your standards are pretty low. You watch it as a 19-year-old, but not so much. And but when I watch,
oh well, I can say that Space Giants holds up, man. I was cracking
and when I watch
up.
Buck Rogers now, it holds up. I can watch that now. So it's not everything.
Oh, no doubt. There are some things that I'm very happy to have around, and I don't feel like I'm actually glad that they're still kind of goofy and all that. I think I'm going to talk about this next week because I think next week we'll do more on remakes and stuff. But
yeah, let's do that next week because we got to get onto our topic. We're 80s.
It's like we're just
going to be in our 80s by the time we get there.
Well, before we start with the 80s, Greg, you had a movie from the vault.
Movies from the vault.
Well, my movie from the vault is Summer Rental. This movie was from the late 80s. It had John Candy in it. He played an air traffic controller that was a little burned out, so he takes his family down to the Florida coast and rents a house.
I'm laughing already.
Yeah, really.
The house they rented was a dump and owned by the evil rich guy in town who was played by Richard Crenna, who's a staple of 80s movies.
Of course. That's how you know it's an 80s movie.
From Rambo.
Awesome. What you call hell, he calls home.
Anyway, it turns out Richard Crenna is a big aficionado of sailing.
Do they have a race?
Yes, they have. They end up having a race.
God.
Yes, exactly. I was gonna bring that up. 80s movies lie to us in several strong respects, and Summer Rental is a good example of that because there are two things that it does that show up more than once in the 80s that are completely untrue. And first is that you will meet a woman who's had breast implants that will want you to try them out for no reason. That's never happened to me, and I've met several women that I'm sure have had them. And they didn't care at all if I saw if they felt real or not. And the other thing is that all disputes can be settled with a boat race.
Or a ski race.
Or whatever, a competition. Like there were
that
regattas.
theme.
There are two separate movies. Like One Crazy Summer did the exact same thing where they had to go after them with a regatta.
And Better Off Dead, too, a skiing competition.
Yeah, skiing competition and that. And there are several there's a whole ski genre. That's South Park tackled that. The whole... Hey, Stan Darsh.
And then, if you can't solve the problem with a race of some kind in an 80s movie, you can always have a benefit concert where you do some kind of talent show and somehow raise just enough money
exactly.
to save the summer camp.
Or say the frat house.
Yeah, exactly, the frat house.
And you have to raise $10,000 in a night. In my whole life of trying to do creative pursuits, I haven't raised $10,000 cumulatively in my whole life from my creative things. I just don't buy that idea that we're going to throw a party.
You haven't done a benefit concert. Apparently.
Well, I have done a benefit. I have done benefits, and I haven't raised that much money even for other people.
You got to get those Revenge of the Nerds guys with their keyboards.
Yeah, you got to get
stuff.
those guys to dress up like spacemen and play fancy violin
pay
stuff.
A ton of money to see that? What sorority girl wouldn't go to that party?
Yeah, really.
Exactly. When I wear a Darth Vader mask, I don't just hook up with like the head cheerleader. God, those movies all lied to us completely.
Constantly.
It was that's the opposite. Right now, young America, if you're one of those high school nerds, don't watch that kind of crap and believe it. You're going to have to start doing sports right now, or you're going to have to be so good at the nerd stuff that you become a billionaire. But just being good at video games is not going to cut it.
That's probably one of the great lies of the 80s, that you can build a girl with a computer.
Oh, yeah, good, because girls out there, yeah, you'd be out if we could.
And if you go to space camp, they're actually going to put you in the space shuttle.
Exactly. And they don't have robots.
Johnny
All
Five's
80s
not
movies
alive?
completely lie. You can't just play like some pumped up anthematic music and just learn how to do something.
Or, rebuild an entire frat house in 30 seconds with just with a montage.
Exactly. You can't just do like 3 pull-ups and then you're ready to fight like 8 karate guys in a tournament.
Well, going back to Summer Rental, they did that too with a montage. They built a
sailboat out of an old fish restaurant,
which is awesome. Well, my favorite part is how they win is like Candy like he puts his shorts up for a little extra, like
sail.
To catch a little extra wind. He actually rigs up his shorts into the sails.
Awesome.
Because they're so big. Because he's fat.
That's a great movie, man. I gotta go buy that.
Well, that's a good one.
Yeah.
I've actually not seen that one either. I am remiss. So.
Jeez, where were you, man?
I don't know. I guess I was playing sports. Actually, that's a lie. I've never played a sport in my life.
Yeah, exactly. By sports, do you mean dolls?
Enough with the dolls. One time.
As a grown-up, I'm sure in the 80s, you probably would play dress up with your dolls all the time. That had to come from somewhere. Oh, Lord, that's sad. I'm sorry, world.
Well, anyway, Summer Rental, starring John Candy. Also had John Larroquette in it. If you're at the local video store and you see it, check it out because it's a lot of fun.
I know, because kids, you're getting in an awful bad habit of not watching movies that are like 10 years old or more, and you're missing all the great 80s movies. And speaking of which, since we suddenly stumbled on topic, I guess we'll talk about what we feel are the greatest films and TV shows of the 80s. And I have a perfect 10 list.
Radical.
Tubular, man.
Gnarly. Reaganomics.
Oh, I miss it. I miss it so much in my heart.
The 80s?
Oh, yeah.
I wish I could go back now.
I do too. The 21st century is so depressing. These days, every movie you go to is so depressing. Everybody's so cynical.
We're all so cool
it's
now.
It's not just that.
I'm so tired. Cynical is the word because we're also so preoccupied with trying to be cool. We make fun of the 80s because they were so poppy and so like every movie did have like a montage and all that, but they were all about, the little guy making good.
There was
I think
a lot
we can
of,
do with a little bit of that.
I wouldn't say cynicism, but there was a lot. It wasn't an optimistic decade by any means, especially in music and stuff, because there was always this threat of nuclear war, and you hear it all over the place.
But what I observed back then, and I observe it now, is like when the threat seems more imminent, the media at the time becomes more sort of jubilant.
I agree.
The music was about dark things, but it wasn't dark music. Movies are about dark things, but they weren't dark movies. It was like we were trying to fight that idea of an impending apocalypse by being positive.
And then in the 90s, when things were going swimmingly,
things were going
everything
fine.
got
Everyone
all
was
dark.
complaining all the time.
Yeah.
The nuclear war thing did play a part in movies. There were several movies like Road Warrior.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, Road Warrior, perfect example. I was just talking about that the other day with a couple of my buddies. It's like, why am I wearing a tire? I mean, I know we're poor and everything, but this doesn't even. Why did I wear a tire?
Why do I have 5 scarves on my arm?
Yeah.
What are these for?
This doesn't even make sense. This isn't even serving a purpose. Do we all have to have mohawks?
Why do I have lawn chairs tied to the roof of my car?
I mean, did we have to go completely crazy? That doesn't make sense, man.
One day we'll do an episode all about post-apocalyptic fashion.
And
because
as well, we totally could because they're the funniest.
Oh, well, okay. Anyway, 80s, perfect 10.
But this is movies that managed to be the best, in my opinion, of whatever they were trying to be. In the 80s especially, I think there were a lot of movies that kind of set the standard for other movies of that kind. So there are probably better movies that came out in the 80s in your opinion, but whatever. So starting with 1980, and we could do a show about this, that's why I'm going to go ahead and get it out of the way now. The Empire Strikes Back.
Crap.
Yeah, I've never seen that one.
I'm not familiar with that film. Yeah, I'm glad you guys asked.
It insists upon itself.
This movie is a rarity.
Didn't care for it.
That it is the greatest sequel of all time, which is no small feat considering that it followed the greatest film of all time. Not only that, but it managed to be a great movie on its own while expanding on and experimenting with not just the Star Wars mythology, but exactly how daring you can be with a blockbuster sequel. In a time where the trilogy was by no means the norm in mainstream films, finishing with such an open-ended cliffhanger was an act of cinematic heroism. And that courage paid off. Empire topped its predecessor, elevating Star Wars to heights it would never reach with any of the successive films and setting the standard for science fiction and sequels in general. Which I don't mean science fiction, because Star Wars really isn't science fiction. We kind of discussed this before, but I mean, when you think of the sort of science fiction event film, big science fiction like sci-fi special effects blockbusters, Empire Strikes Back is it.
Absolutely.
Especially, Star Wars first and then Empire.
And it brought Yoda into the films, man.
And it has a Muppet. Yeah, this movie is all Sean. Because on top of everything else, they bring in a Muppet.
A Muppet
like,
who,
awesome.
yeah, but what a performance, though, because that Muppet is more human than most of the characters in typical sci-fi kind of movies. That Muppet.
It's funny you say that, because they actually did. They tried to get Frank Oz, who was the puppeteer. They tried to get him a nomination for Best Supporting Actor for that movie, and no one would go for it because they didn't consider puppeteering a performance kind of art.
What a shame.
It is a shame, because the puppeteers are all getting screwed now. Everything's CGI. Frank Oz still does the voice of Yoda, but there's no puppet anymore.
The biggest shame is that these days they don't use puppets. And I think Yoda lost something in those last 3 films because he was CG.
Yeah, he did. He was
Sure.
so good in Empire.
Yeah, it's fun. He gets to hop around, but as far as emotion, yeah, absolutely. That puppet, man, just acts his little heart out. That's what makes Empire awesome, because at the time they're making Empire, they're like, guys, is this stupid? Like, they have no frame of reference to think that was going to work.
Because it'd never been done before.
We're going with the puppet.
A serious character being a puppet, like an actual
Being
serious
a puppet,
character.
acting against actual live action actors. How would you know? But that so much of Empire, and this is why I think, like, to me, Empire stands out above Star Wars cinematically, because I think they experimented so much with it. They had a working formula already, but they tried to expand on an already built-in mechanism of success with Star Wars, and it worked. And they never did that again in the Star Wars series. There's not another Star Wars movie beyond the first one, besides Empire, that really tried to bring anything to the mythology. So there was a lot of risk involved in doing Empire Strikes Back, and I think that they earned a lot of reward in doing it that way.
One day down the line, we'll do a Star Wars episode, because we're all Star Wars buffs, and we've been putting it off because we don't want to go that route.
I am afraid to go there, because that'll be a 9-hour episode.
We probably need to move on, because we really could talk about this.
We do, because we were only on the first movie.
All right, move on.
But, I don't think we'll have as much to talk about on some of the others. 1981 is a movie that I really enjoy a lot, that a lot of people of our generation, I think, also respect, which is Excalibur.
Garbage. I'm just kidding. I'm going to do that for every movie you say. Crap.
Yeah, this is going to be an easy episode for you guys.
Sewage.
We're probably talking about one of the first films I'd ever seen with very strong adult themes in it. And also,
sure, yeah, it ain't Camelot.
That's another one of those movies that upon second viewing 20 years later doesn't hold up as well. The one thing that I do enjoy about watching Excalibur again is some of the cast that was in that movie. Liam Neeson was in the film, Patrick Stewart.
Yeah, Patrick Stewart is in the film.
Man, how old is Patrick Stewart?
Right. Liam Neeson goes way back, man.
How old is Liam Neeson?
He's in Krull.
Wow.
All right,
Krull's not on this list, by the way. Don't anybody worry. But Liam Neeson was in Krull.
I reject this list.
But Excalibur, to me, was also my introduction into pure fantasy.
Well, especially because it does magic, and it does like sword and sorcery and all that kind of stuff. And you don't see that. There's been so many movies that have tried to make the King Arthur story work on the big screen, and only Excalibur has come close. Because there have been a lot of literally, like, King Arthur movies are right up there with movies that have members of the Friends cast in them. They usually suck horribly. Like, this movie is the one, and still now, like, think about it. Like, the King Arthur movie, First Night?
Yeah.
Can you remember that?
That's horrible.
It was terrible. And so many other movies. There's like a King Arthur movie, and I almost went to see it just so I could mention it on the show, but I couldn't bring myself. And it's called The Last Legion.
Is that the one with
got the dude from Love Actually in it? But this movie came out this summer, The Last Legion, and also purported to be a semi-historical accounting of the King Arthur story. And you can always ditch those, because when they say that, it just means that they're not going to have magic in it. It just means this isn't a fantasy. It's not going to be any more believable than a movie that has magic and wizards in it. It's just not going to have that.
How can you not have Merlin in the story? How does that make sense?
The mythology is rich with magic. And King Arthur is one of these things that's become so cliche that a lot of people have tried to do different takes on it, and it just gets worse, worse, and worse. Excalibur tried to do from start to finish the mythology as presented in all the many stories, and tried to do it in a way that had a constant, continuity. And it's probably the most accurate to those stories of any movie you'll ever see. And they should just stop making them. The only other movie that comes close is Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and they're not trying to be serious. It's supposed to be funny. That's the only other good King Arthur movie. The runner-up for that year is Raiders of the Lost Ark. And the only reason I say that it isn't a perfect 10 is because it has a typical Hollywood special effects finale. I really don't like the ending of Raiders. But
it was a letdown.
It's dumb. But the rest of it is awesome. Like Lawrence Kasdan wrote the script, and Indiana Jones is really dark, and he's almost scary, and he's totally film noir in that movie. And that's because of the way he's written. And then the rest of the movies make him
the second movie, he's got a kid hanging out with him all of a sudden.
And then the third movie, he's with his dad. It's like, good Lord.
Well, the third movie was just camp, but the second movie, actually, he was a little bit more of a seedy character out for
least his
what he called
character
fortune.
was seedier.
Yeah.
But then they put the kid there to lighten him up, and that's what I'm worried about in the fourth movie. It's like, why can't Indy ever just be Indy? Like, we're going to put Indy in this fourth movie, and guess who's going to be hanging around with him, cracking wise? LaBouffe. LaBouffe!
Who's writing this one? Have they ever settled on that?
Who even knows?
I think about 10 different people. They've been working on the script for, really, 10 years.
To me, that's the thing that makes me nervous about it more than LaBouffe or anything like that. Just the fact that they've had such a hard time putting together a script that doesn't bode well.
The only thing that's appealing to it in my mind right now is Karen Allen's coming back.
Well, because she's going to end up being LaBouffe's mom. That's going to... Oh, God. And there's these sad days... they were trying to come up with an idea where they're like, why don't we bring in Tom Selleck as his brother? Like, why don't you let Indy be Indy? Oh, how can you be dark when you're hanging out with your dad? I know I find it incredibly hard to shoot people when my dad is looking over my shoulder. But moving on. We could do another episode. We could do an episode about that.
And we should.
1982 brings us to good Harrison Ford, which is Blade Runner.
Replicants are like any other machine. They're either a benefit or a hazard.
And there's no taking this movie away. It's so awesome they never did a sequel to this. It's like it's almost tried to even talk about how great this movie is because everyone thinks so. Now, it doesn't have a lot to do with the Philip K. Dick novel that it's based on, which is a lot more absurd. But it set a standard and a tone for science fiction films that is still present in films today. Like, people are still trying to emulate it. It's not even a standard that people are managing to accomplish. People are still trying to do what Ridley Scott did in this movie. He did the same thing with this that he did with Alien. He took sci-fi and he used it as a backdrop for a sophisticated storytelling instead of a story device by itself.
I just recently finished reading a book about Blade Runner called Future Noir. And I highly suggest anyone interested in filmmaking read that book because it's really amazing how that particular film came about. In the book, they go through all the different incarnations from the script. And when they finally went into shooting, Ridley Scott really pushed the budget way beyond its limits. And it really, from a technical standpoint, the movie was a disaster. It was really out of control.
Totally out of control, Apocalypse Now kind of thing.
Which has also turned out to be a classic. Yeah. There's something to be said I'm not a big fan of overspending on movies because I think like they make a movie like Superman and then they spend $300 million and they're like, it didn't really make the kind of movie we wanted to make. It's like, well, what were you shooting for? You had to make like $1 billion to break even. But on these movies, if you're doing it artistically, I think there's something to be said for sticking it out.
Well, I think it goes to demonstrate Ridley Scott's genius, his attention to detail, especially with the sets. The sets for this movie were fantastic. They were designed by Sid Mead, but visually it's a stunning movie.
Well, they created a world. That's something that you want to see in movies, and something I think CGI has sort of robbed us of, because CGI, they create these elaborate backdrops in the computer, but you never feel like it's real. In Blade Runner, it feels real. It's pretty amazing that people of this modern generation take for granted, because they're so used to CGI. They don't understand. It's like
CGI versus traditional special effects are a particular rant of mine. We could go on forever about that, because I feel that CGI is way overused.
Yeah, I just came out pro puppet, man. CGI killed the puppets and the midgets, and I'm mad for both of them.
And the model spaceships, which I really miss.
Well, if you build a model and you digitize it so you can animate it in the computer, that's fine. Like Jurassic Park, they still had Phil Tippett making model dinosaurs. And that's why they look so real, even though they're computer animated. But then later on, like you see in some of the Star Wars films, they're like, well, let's just create it all in the computer. And it looks stupid. It looks cartoony. It looks like a drawing. It's got to be based on something real. I miss that. I miss everything real.
Yeah, I do too. Okay, well, moving on.
Yeah, the runner-up for that is Conan the Barbarian. And I think we've covered Conan a lot. The ultimate sword and sorcery movie. Maybe even the ultimate Arnold movie.
Crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentation of their women.
All right. So I'm going to move straight on to 1983, which for me is DC Cab.
Oh, Lord.
Can't help it. I won't apologize.
You got a choice, Jack. You either talk or you hurt.
Yeah, I've only seen bits and pieces of it, so
yeah, I've not seen it either, man.
Oh, you're missing out. Mr. T, Max Gale, Adam Baldwin, Bill Maher, Paul Rodriguez, Marsha Warfield, the frickin' Barbarian brothers are in this movie, man. This is the ultimate 80s movie. It's got a special appearance by Irene Cara and a song on the soundtrack. And strangely enough, this is one of the very original Joel Schumacher films. Back before, he got weird and started making...
I was saying, before he got weird, he just made DC Cab. Back when he was normal.
Hey, well... If you got to define a guy's career, think of it in those terms. But this guy was all 80s, He did The Lost Boys. And he did Flatliners, which was that.
I will check out DC Cab. I've heard you talk about it enough now that you've got me intrigued. It better live up to it.
Man, I'm talking it up. It's the ultimate 80s movie. It's too bad Wilson's not here to defend me. He shares my love of the DC Cab. Here's where you're gonna get all mad at me. The runner-up for the same year is Evil Dead.
See?
I see you may take issue with this, but
I haven't seen DC Cab, so I can't.
Evil Dead
I can't
takes
do
the
that.
back seat.
But if once I see DC Cab, you may hear from me about this.
Yeah, we'll return to this concept. You can't compare and contrast. Yeah, you both are gonna have to watch that and get back to me, because I'm gonna win this one by default because I've seen both films. But on a plane, I think we can all agree with 1984 brought us Ghostbusters.
Yeah,
I think we better split up.
Good idea.
Yeah, we can do more damage that way.
Now, to me, Ghostbusters is one of the great, perfect movies. Not only did it do something new for the time, but it also incorporated the talents of some of the funniest people of the time. No one has ever come close to topping Ghostbusters, not even its creators. It created a genre, blurring the line between action and comedy by proving that you could use action sci-fi conventions and special effects and set pieces, like elaborate set pieces, in a comedy to create a blockbuster, introducing a generation to the world of parapsychology while they were at it. That is a great movie. In fact, I think Ghostbusters may be maybe not the funniest movie, but possibly the most perfect comedy.
Now, I have only ever really had one problem with Ghostbusters, and this is just my personal thing. But I don't like what's her name?
Sigourney Weaver?
I don't think Sigourney Weaver is pretty. And I never have. And I don't really understand. I'm not trying to be mean about it, but I don't understand in the movie she's got multiple suitors who are fighting over her. She's got like 3 dudes.
Yeah, but look at those suitors. It's Bill Murray and
yeah, but
and
then
Rick
there's
Moranis.
that guy that plays violin or whatever, and there's some fancy guy too.
That guy was kind of hoity-toity looking. I bet she was awesome looking for a classical cellist.
See, now you're insulting classical cellists.
I like cellists. I just like the way they work.
I'm just saying that's to me, if they had gotten a more classically beautiful Hollywood, because I mean, anyone could have played that role. There was no reason.
She was very big at that time, though. That's the thing.
Yeah, and I kind of agree that I didn't necessarily like her playing that character because we've seen her in Aliens before, or Aliens hadn't come out yet, and
yeah, I buy her as a tough girl,
but I
just don't buy her as
she
the
was
pretty
supposed
girl.
to be a foil though because she was a dramatic actress and they put her in with all these funny men. I think her purpose was to be sort of a contrast to them because they're so goofy.
Well,
she's the real world.
But, then again, that still could have been done by a number of dramatic
actresses. Could have been a prettier girl, is all I'm saying.
Probably prettier.
I don't mind her being serious, but, she doesn't have to look like a gorilla.
Oh, my Lord. See, I didn't say that.
Didn't she make that monkey move?
Yeah. Gorillas in the
She
mist.
doesn't have to look like Diane Fossey. That's all I'm saying. Brooks's official quote for this episode is that Sigourney Weaver has a monkey face.
No. I didn't say that.
That's what I understood you to say.
That's my only real problem with the movie. That's all I'm saying.
1985 brought us another classic, Back to the Future.
Oh, yes.
My calculations are correct. When this baby hits 88 miles per hour, you're going to see some serious
Back to the
Inventive,
Future.
funny, delightfully original. This goofy take on time travel shot Michael J. Fox into stardom. Carved a permanent cultural niche for the DeLorean while they were doing it.
He was already a star.
He was a TV star, but he
was
really
a star on TV. Here's the thing that's a funny story 1985-wise, and this is not a runner-up. I'm not mentioning it for that. But in 1985, Michael J. Fox made a movie before Back to the Future, which was Teen Wolf.
Yeah, which was awful.
It is awful.
But it was a hit
shelved.
because of Back to the Future.
Exactly. Because when Back to the Future came out, it was so huge that they released Teen Wolf right after it. And Teen Wolf, because Michael J. Fox was so big at the time, it became a hit also. Both of those movies were like the top 10 movies of that year. So that was really huge. That's Michael J. Fox's coming out. Before that, he was just on Family Ties. He'd been on a couple of smaller movies.
Yeah, but I mean, he was a star of Family Ties, and Family Ties was a huge show, one of the biggest shows of the decade.
There's a difference between a TV star and a movie star, especially back then. You see now, it's more common now for people to go back and forth between TV and movies, but back then, you were a TV person or you were a movie person, or you moved from one to the other after a while. But he was still doing Family Ties when he did Back to the Future, and that wasn't that common back then. So this movie really propelled him into the stratosphere.
It was a good movie, though. That's the essence. I think everyone can agree on that.
It was a good movie. It was a good performance.
There's one part that me and Andrew, the singer for Bell's Wake, plug the band.
Oh Lord.
Anyway,
bellswake.com.
There's a scene in it that we both joke about that we have always had a problem with. One dumb thing at the very end when he's doing the Chuck Berry bit, he's playing the guitar. And then this guy picks up the phone and is like, "Hi, Chuck, this is your cousin, Marvin Berry." Like, if you called your cousin, would you say your full name? Especially if that dude has your name, too?
That's not the only dumb part, though. The fact that he's playing Johnny Be Good and he's clearly not even singing it.
Oh, I know. It's
like that's...
I think if he just said Chuck, it would have been obvious enough because they're playing a Chuck Berry song. You know what I mean? They're like, "Chuck, check this out." I think that would have been enough.
I think that was probably a little too tongue-in-cheek to suggest that Marty inadvertently invented rock and roll.
Yeah, I mean...
Because all time travel stories do that, and it's always lame. Like, I used to love Quantum Leap, which I still think is a great show, but they did that all the time. It was like a running gag on the thing where they would just have him somehow magically invent something in the time that he was visiting, or run into some person. Like, he invented the moonwalk and he met Michael Jackson, whatever. Yeah. Like little stuff like that. I get the cuteness of that in time travel movies, but it always does take away. But I would much rather have them say that he created rock and roll than have them say that he's actually singing that song.
I know, that
which is
was
just
the worst
not happening.
Lip-syncing
It's not happening for me
ever.
at all. Well, I mean, it doesn't sound even a little like him. Even at the beginning of the movie where they're playing in a band, they kind of suck. Like, he's not playing that song.
Well, it's not meant
Well,
to
who
be
cares?
serious.
It's a fun movie. The movie, I wish they'd make more movies like Back to the Future, because it sort of reminds me of the Buck Rogers thing, where it's they're having fun. The good old-fashioned science fiction, you know? It's not all gritty and cynical and annoying.
Back to the Future is actually my midpoint in movie history. There are movies that occur pre-Back to the Future or post-Back to the Future. So, like, Ghostbusters is pre-Back to the Future, Aliens is post-Back to the Future.
I can get that. 1985, man. It's the mid-'80s.
This is how we delineate history.
This is how we roll.
In our world.
Hey, man, I remember stuff that way. Aliens actually is a runner-up of the next year to me.
A runner-up to Back to the Future?
Well, it's a runner-up for the 1986 film, which is personal, which is, to me, Highlander.
Oh, see, I'm not going to I can't agree with you on this.
You know why that you made that sound, though? It's not because of the original, which is fun. It's because it's one of those movies that was tragically revisited over and over and over again, never successfully. Like, there have been so many follow-ups, and none of them are good. Like, we were at Dragon Con, and there was like a bootlegger that had a new Highlander movie that I'd never heard of there. I was like, there's another one? It's not even out yet. Jeez, it's a Highlander 5? And out of curiosity, I went to Netflix to see if this was actually real, if this was out somewhere. And while they didn't have that one, there was another one.
Yikes.
I was like, there's another one? What is Highlander, the Search for Revenge or whatever? And it was some kind of anime kind of thing with Highlander.
Now, it's not that I didn't make that sound because of the sequels, even though the sequels have absolutely destroyed its legacy. But I just don't think that it's as good a movie as Aliens. And I do like Highlander, but...
Well, this is a personal preference. I obviously the argument can be made that Aliens is a better movie, but I don't want to exalt Alien, and I don't want to exalt Blade Runner, and I don't want to exalt Ridley Scott and James Cameron so that every time we make a top 10 list, we're only mentioning movies that they made. Obviously, Aliens is awesome. That's why I mentioned it, even though my personal preference is Highlander. But for me, when I was a kid, Highlander was Blade Runner, because I liked Blade Runner, but it didn't fire my imagination like Highlander did, because Highlander was, obviously it was cool when you're that age. But, Russell Mulcahy, the transitions that he uses in that movie visually, this is a mainstream movie that got my attention. It's got music by Queen. It's totally 80s.
Yeah. That's actually,
But when you watch it, there's a lot of awesome visual elements to the movie that made me think, movies, even when they're fun, don't have to be crap. Like, movies can still have, like, an artistic visual style to them, even if it is just about a bunch of people running around trying to cut each other's heads off. And that meant a lot to me when I was that age. When I first saw Highlander, I was like, maybe movies can be important, even if the story's not that big. It doesn't have to be some kind of Oscar film to take pride in its visual style. And that's where I think that the Highlander movies, besides just having retarded stories after that, none of them have met it visually. Like, none of them had that combination of elements.
Well, Mulcahy was a video director before that, though, wasn't he?
Yeah, and it's very,
that's where
very cool.
It came from, I guess, his MTV generation video coolness.
All right, moving on to 1987. I'm going to redeem Sam Raimi and say 1987 was the year of Evil Dead 2.
All right. Who wants some?
This was a really good year for genre films, so I am giving him a big position, because you know what else came out in 1982? Hellraiser.
7.
Whatever. Yes. Evil Dead 2, 1987. And we're going to roll it back so that this list never stops. And that's how I met your grandmother.
Hellraiser is a good movie, too. Yes.
But anyway, Evil Dead 2 was great, because it took all the great elements of Evil Dead, put a bigger budget on it, and they made a movie that pretty much Evil Dead 2 is the reason that I watch horror movies to this day and go, that was crap. Because Evil Dead 2 was the movie where it was like, this is how you could fight back. This is something that too many horror movies pretend like the people in them are helpless, and then you don't identify with them. Like, Ash isn't that way at all. Ash rises as a horror hero, and not like a Freddy horror hero, like an actual protagonist, like an actual good guy who fights the bad guys. Like, you never see that in horror movies. And he looks like he stepped right out of a Bernie Wrightson comic. I mean, and Bruce Campbell just shines in that movie. Like, that's the movie that makes Bruce Campbell who he is today.
There's some really surreal weirdness in that one too, where
it's awesome in its weirdness.
Stuffed animal heads start moving around. And
That's
stuff.
what I was about to say, and they're all laughing and stuff, and he starts laughing
stuff.
too.
I'm not sure how
that's
to
where
feel
you start
about that.
getting like, oh, this guy's actually crazy. Like, that's where you see this is how it happens when a guy just steps up and he says, "Okay, let's fight zombies." This is the origin of that. What puts you in the mindset where you just say, "It's a trick, get an axe." And you don't care about the emotional quality of that at all. That's where it comes from.
Do you have a runner-up to this?
You finally just decide. There's lots of runners-up. 1987 was a good year. Like I said, Hellraiser. Man, Hellraiser's another awesome movie that was ruined in sequels. No good Hellraiser sequels. But the original was great. Robocop came out in 1987.
Another one with bad sequels.
Also ruined by sequels and a bad TV show. Hellraiser didn't have a TV show, but often, Highlander, The Crow, Robocop, all had bad TV shows too. I don't know what it is, man, but Who Framed Roger... Oh, no, that was 1988. I guess I just skipped straight to 1988.
Predator.
Oh, wow.
I didn't mention
Yeah.
Predator. That's right. That was
Predator.
1987.
I was asleep there for a little while until you started talking about Predator.
It was 1987, but it's good you're here. Predator was 1987, and we cannot forget the Predator. 1987 was an awesome year, man. There's lots of great movies that came out.
So Die Hard was 87 too?
88 was Die Hard.
Oh, okay. All right.
And I didn't have that on my list either, but it should be there.
All right,
go ahead. My 1988 is Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which I guess people don't remember it as much anymore now, but it was really awesome when it came out.
Yeah. It's odd how that movie hasn't held up because.
And I think if you watch it, like, it has effects-wise and all that. Like, there's things in Roger Rabbit that you still don't see. You never see people mix animation and live action where it works as well as that one did. And plus the licenses that they pulled off in that movie, where you actually get to see Warner Brothers characters and Disney characters in the same movie,
in the same scene.
You never see that. Yeah, like Daffy Duck and Donald Duck in the same
Mickey
scene.
and Bugs.
Yeah, how does that not hold up for people? I don't know what it is. Another Robert Zemeckis movie there too.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it necessarily doesn't hold up, but it just seems like nobody remembers it.
Well, to me it doesn't hold up in that respect. I don't mean it doesn't hold up if you as if it doesn't hold up if you watch it. I still think it's an awesome movie, but I don't know. I don't know what it is about that. Maybe because it's a Disney movie that people tend to forget. The runner-up for that year, besides Die Hard, which would also be a runner-up because that's a great movie, the ultimate action movie, Die Hard. Nobody ever will top that. And after that is The Naked Gun.
Naked Gun I enjoy, but ruined for me now because OJ's in it, and I feel creepy watching it.
That is true. But
and that's a shame because that's one of my favorite movies.
I don't know. I can still watch it because I always assume everybody in movies are jerks. Although,
Everyone's a murderer.
I don't assume they all killed their wives. You know what I liked from 1989, which this is going to be another movie that I'm not even going to say it didn't hold up because it wasn't even respecting its time, was The Abyss. Have you seen that movie, Brooks?
I have seen The Abyss.
Isn't that an awesome?
I mean, I think it's important for some of the groundbreaking special effects that were in it.
To me, that's my favorite James Cameron movie.
And they hold up.
Now, I love Aliens, don't get me wrong, but to me, The Abyss had a lot of ideas and concepts that are completely inventive, a lot more creative and interesting. And God, you got Ed Harris in there, Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio. There's a lot of great people in that movie. It's a very human story, that movie, much more so than some of his other
And the
movies.
effects hold up pretty well.
I think everything about it is awesome. And then
Well, I think that's one of the very early movies where computer-generated effects really play a major part of the film.
Well, I think one thing they got right in it is they were supposed to represent something otherworldly, and it made it easier. Like, when these things are all fluorescent coming out of the bottom of the ocean, it's easier to use computer effects for that.
Hey, I want to break the rules real quick, but this reminds me of another 80s movie, actually, and I think both of you would agree that The Last Starfighter was great.
I could have put that on this list. I'm not sure. I think that's 1983, if I'm remembering right. But that's the ultimate kid fantasy movie because he's awesome at playing a video game, and somehow that gets him recruited into some galactic Starfleet.
What an awesome fantasy! I mean,
it's the greatest.
Well, the reason I brought it up, the Abyss made me think about it. Was that the movie was actually the first movie to use completely computer-generated special effects for the space scenes. If you watch that movie, you can tell it's obvious.
Yeah, but good effort. How far before it's time to try that at all? I mean, it's like watching a low-grade video game now, but I mean, in 1983, to try that at all is really impressive.
I don't remember
that
it looking
puts me in
weird.
the mind of another movie that also used computer-generated effects was Tron. I don't know why I didn't mention Tron on this.
Now, see,
this
Tron,
list.
it works because
That's a
it's
1980. Well, because it's supposed to be computers.
And it's not supposed to look real. It's supposed to look surreal. And it works very well for that.
They also use a bunch of clever conventions in Tron. Like, they shoot the whole movie in black and white, and then they actually went back and touched it up with fluorescence.
Made it creepy. That bad guy was creepy looking in that movie. Still, to this day, I watch that and go, man, that guy gives me nightmares just thinking about it. Even though the character is not scary, he just looks scary.
I don't know. I guess Tron wasn't groundbreaking, so I didn't mention it on this list to begin with. But I love Tron. I could have mentioned it as an '80s movie. It should be remembered.
Well, Tron was groundbreaking for its special effects, but story-wise, it was kind of weak.
I'm kind of mad that in the world of CGI, they don't come back to Tron and try to do something. Wouldn't that be awesome now? Couldn't you do something great
Tron
with
was
Tron?
the Matrix of its time. You know, I'm surprised they haven't too. All right.
I can. That was 1989, so that finished that list. The only other runner-up I had was Batman, and I'm not really going to talk about Batman.
Yeah,
because
I don't know, man.
While that movie was good for the time, I think it's completely outdated now.
I liked it the first time I saw it.
Batman Begins knocked Batman off the charts, unfortunately for Tim Burton. But if not for Tim Burton and Batman, there probably would be no Batman Begins. So there's that.
So that was our top perfect 10 80s. And you know what, guys? I think we've gone on a long time. We're going to need to split this up into 2 episodes, I think, which is a first for TV Ate My Dinner. So
a two-parter. Well, everybody loves the 80s. I mean, we cover 80s movies. That's going to take a whole show by itself.
Oh, we could easily go on about this stuff.
Yeah, we could have gone on. Like, how many movies that weren't even on that list?
Well, I'm personally...
And you guys you didn't even have lists that...
I'm deeply disappointed that you didn't mention Ice Pirates.
Ice Pirates. I guess that was an 80s movie, wasn't it? It had to be like 81 or something, right?
And I'm also, I am legitimately upset that you didn't mention Princess Bride.
Oh, wow.
You know why? It's nothing against The Princess Bride. That's an awesome movie. But it's almost like Aliens. Like, you get tired. You make a list. You don't want to just exalt the movies that everyone already knows are awesome. You want to, blow the dust off. Like, to me, like saying DC Cab is more valuable because that's going to open people's eyes.
But at the outset, you said the best of what they were trying to be. And I think Princess Bride is the best storybook movie.
Well,
I can't think of any
I think
others.
they'll never be better. Like, I just recently saw Stardust in the theater, and I thought that mirrored that sort of concept, and I thought it did it really well. But it's not, nothing's The Princess Bride.
And
in fact, that was the first movie since The Princess Bride I can think of that probably did follow in that same genre.
There were some trends that you didn't mention, like that got started in the 80s. Like, for example, the dancing movies. Breakin' being my personal favorite.
Breakin' 2, Electric Boogaloo.
The breakdance, Electric Boogaloo, the most famous movie title of a movie that no one's ever seen.
The greatest sequel, yeah. Who's seen Breakin' 2? Nobody. I know one guy one time, one of my favorite people in the world, actually owned Breakin' and Breakin' 2 on DVD.
I have Breakin'. I don't have Breakin' 2. I should track that down.
You got
Electric Boogaloo.
You've got to finish out the set, man. How are you going to know how it ends?
And there's so many classics like Jim Cotta. We didn't mention that.
Yeah, we didn't mention the ninja phase at all. I didn't mention a lot of the 80s trends. That's a whole different thing.
Know.
Like, we can do a perfect 10 of 80s trends.
Let's do
the
that.
ninja phase being one of them.
Let's do that.
Well, it's fairly obvious that there's a lot more that we could talk about because the 80s were a really wonderful decade.
Oh, Lord. It was
a wonderful decade. I mean, it was awesome. The big hair and
it was like 10 whole years.
The most totally rad decade.
I know. It seemed like it went on forever, like or at least 10 years.
Okay, part two is coming up. But for you guys, stay tuned.
But stay tuned, and we'll do part 2 of our 80s retrospective.
And that's Greg's television perfect 10. So that's going to be awesome. Thanks for listening. Check out tv8mydinner.com for more episodes and further information about us. You can also find us on MySpace, which is myspace.com/tv8mydinner. You can go to darkcrazy.com and you'll find lots of perfect 10 lists there, including this one that we did today. And That's Sean's publishing site, darkcrazy.com. Check that out. We're kind of a subsidiary of Dark Crazy. That's how I see it. One of
We
its
all fall
many,
under the
many-
Dark Crazy umbrella.
Yeah, there you go.
The all-encompassing
The corporate
conglomerate
umbrella.
that is the Dark Crazy.
The multinational conglomerate. And all right, we'll see you very soon with episode 2 of this part 2. My name is Brooks.
I'm Sean.
I'm Greg.
That's Greg.
And we'll see you then.
Awesome.
We'll see you then.
And the model spaceships, which I really miss. I love my model spaceships. Especially the Sequest. The Sequest wasn't a spaceship, it was a submarine.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.